Today we're going to delve into the barely age-old question of whether or not the SNES Classic can be hacked. Well, first off, yes, it can be hacked. There's not been one single thing in history that has not been able to be reverse engineered. Just how it is. Every system ever, there's always been some loophole, some way to get through it. I mean, we had the GameCube and the broadband adapter and Phantasy Star Online, and we were able to pretty much start streaming GameCube games right to our computer that way. I mean, there's always a way. And one thing people don't realize is that a lot of times when you're getting your firmware updates on the various systems, such as PS3 and all that, not only are they throwing some kind of patch into the fray, but they're also not mentioning that they're trying to patch against some sort of circumvention of the system itself. An example of this would be when they removed Linux from the PS3. And of course, there was a class action lawsuit coming to fruition over that for anybody that has ever used Linux like me. And if you're able to prove that you were using Linux at the time it was removed and the class action lawsuit comes through, you get some money out of it, a few $100. But I used Linux. I was able to play Super Mario Brothers and various other NES games. I mean, that's one of the reasons they took that Linux down, because of the emulation that was able to come onto the PS3. But of course now we have RetroArch on PS3, so that changes everything. But in any case, there are several factors that come into play here. And right now in front of me, I have the excellent guide that ClusterM put together, the Hacksheet Mods for Dummies guide. And this goes into the architecture of the NES Mini itself, and it really does a lot in explaining various things. But first off, you'd have to know that there's a partition of 20 megabyte for the original 30 NES games and the artwork. So right there, that's 20 megabytes of games that are pretty much taking up your memory. Now I'm looking at the factors I have on my text pad here. And one of the first things that we had to do in order to flash to the Mini NES was FEL mode, which was holding down, you know, the power and reset for several seconds and releasing the reset. And then, of course, he introduced Clover Shell, which was a better connection. And previously, we were only able to do that with a UART connection. And that's going to be the differential between the NES Mini and the SNES Classic, is whether or not we could do it through a Clover Shell or FEL mode style thing, which would be a soft mod. Or we'd have to get more integrated into the system itself, take it apart, and do a direct UART to USB connection, which is what he had to do in order to get this going off the ground. And I really give huge props to ClusterM, MadMonkey, and HoneyLab, and anybody else involved for really getting things moving. It's just amazing. But as of right now, there's roughly 381.6 megabytes of memory on the NAND flash chip. And typically we'd recommend using only 300 megabyte to flash in games. And obviously this has changed with the more and more HMODs that we have. So obviously if you're just flashing like a few games, say a few Sega CD games and such, you could go like literally up to 330 megabytes and get away with it. But if you're flashing multiple HMODs, you're going to want to stick to that 300 megabyte or less limit. I typically do 275 when I have multiple HMODs installed. But we have 20 megabyte of memory that is pretty much put aside, and it's not even though you're flashing without it, it's still in the internal memory. So that's artwork and that. So if we're taking together the games that would be on the SNES Mini, which are 21 games in total, and they're uncompressed, that comes roughly to about 39.5 megabytes. And obviously the Star Fox 2 I have is just a prototype. It's not the full-fledged version that's coming on the SNES Mini. But we're taking these 40 megabytes on uncompressed games, which is probably going to be equivalent to what's going to be taking up the memory on the SNES Mini. So that automatically takes your 300 megabyte recommended limit down another 40 megabytes. So instead of having the 300 megabytes that would be recommended, we would have 260. And as far as I'm concerned, the SNES Mini inside is literally just a reskin with a different shell of the NES Classic. I could almost guarantee, I mean, I see a very, very high 99.99995% chance that it's the same chip, and it just has that phenomenal SNES emulator with the better FX chip implementation on there, and that's going to be one of the main reasons to have the system right there, is that excellent FX chip implementation. It's going to make games like Yoshi's Island and Pilot Wings, F-Zero just run so much better. I mean, they run good on 2005 right now, but with a less accurate emulation, it's not quite as good as what we would expect on this new SNES Mini. And of course, the other reason would be Star Fox 2. I mean, I played both prototypes, they're fun games, but seeing the true, complete game is just going to be worth the ticket price alone. I mean, if just a cartridge prototype of Star Fox 2 showed up on eBay, you could imagine it would go into the thousands of dollars as far as bid wars. But having this in emulation form for $80, it's not so bad. It's worth it right there. And of course we have the ability to rewind save states, and that's pretty cool too. I mean, I previously showed you on the NES Classic that this could be done as well, but it's still a cool feature indeed, and it's going to make a lot of games a hell of a lot easier to manage for people who have little time on the go, you know? Because back in the day when we were kids, we could play a game for 10, 14 hours at a time and just master the game. But nowadays, you might get to a boss and you just don't want to sit there for hours and hours and hours and hours trying to redo the entire stage over and over again. Say in like Ninja Gaiden Trilogy, for instance, if we ever, you know, flash it over to the SNES Mini with this new rewind feature. You get to that final boss and you die, you're doing that entire last set of stages over again. And it's, some people want to be more casual gamers and not have to stick to that. They'd like to be able to play a game and just casually go through it, maybe use a few save states, rewind. I mean, that's how gamers are nowadays. A lot of them are not as hardcore as we were back in the day, and they really want the casual experience. So it's nice that the SNES Mini offers a variety of ways to do that. You could play legitimately, or you could use save states, or you could use that rewind save state feature. Now we're going to go briefly into the hash sheet guide here. And we're going down. I mean, it says right here, me and MadMonkey have spent many, many hours creating a module system for Hashi 2. They are compatible. Let people create, share, and download various modules for NES Classic Mini with custom skins, music emulators, etc. It's time to write a guide, blah, blah, blah. But the biggest thing right here is where it says tools. It said that they were unable to get a response from the NES Mini over a USB connection, so that's why they used the UART cable soldered into the console. This would be considered a hard mod. Anytime you have to actually solder something, that'd be a hard mod. But if you were playing like the Dreamcast and you use like a boot disc, that'd be a soft mod, because you actually didn't have to take apart the Dreamcast to mod it. You literally could do everything soft. So the biggest difference in the NES Classic and the SNES Mini is whether or not you were going to be able to do a soft mod or a hard mod. Now obviously, even if we do a hard mod, there's going to be scores of people who are going to take the time, and we're going to have plenty of guys that'll help out too in getting the UART connection going and being able to transfer the files. And of course, they're going to obviously have encrypted data on the SNES Mini, but there are so many geniuses out there that it's only going to be a matter of time before it's decrypted. I mean, it's going to be a nice challenge, but it's going to be overcome, and might take a day, might take a two, might take 2 weeks, but it's going to be done. So I'm guaranteeing you right now, you're going to have the ability to do something with the SNES Classic. It's just a matter of how quickly we could do it, and the last factor involved is going to be, obviously, do Cluster, MadMonkey, and HoneyLab care to go forth with this? Because they put so much work into this NES Classic. Are they really going to want to validate themselves yet one more time and put all the effort and work into the SNES Classic? I am really, really hoping they do, because I love the work they did for us, and I hope you enjoyed the video. And yes, the SNES Classic can be hacked, and it will be hacked. It's going to happen, guys.